Hello, welcome to Anita the Pedagogue channel. We continue with our analysis on Oliver Twist, the abridged version by Charles Dickens. We've already looked at a plot analysis and summary, and today we are going to be looking at the characterization, the description of the various characters in the novel. So basically, we are looking at characterization. The protagonist, the main character of the story Oliver Twist is Oliver Twist. And the antagonists, the villains who attacked Oliver Twist are Fagin, Bill Sykes, and Monks. Let's go on and look at the description of the various characters. We'll begin with Oliver Twist. He was born an orphan in a parish workhouse. At 9, he looked thin, pale, malnourished, and a miserable child. He faced a lot of cruelty. He starved, suffered, and lived with wicked people. Even though he is raised in a corrupt environment, he remains innocent throughout the novel. Charles Dickens uses him to prove that criminals are not born evil, but that society is responsible for their behavior. Oliver has strong moral uprightness as he is shocked to see the other children steal from Mr. Brownlow. He is also a good child and refuses to be manipulated and influenced to do evil. When the gang forced him to engage in the burglary, Oliver pleaded with Bill Sykes and Toby Crockett. "Please let me go. I promise not to tell a soul. Don't make me do this." Oliver proved very helpful when the Maylies found him after he was shot at the robbery. This made the Maylies become very fond of Oliver. He was held by Nancy, the Maylies, and Mr. Brownlow to be free from Fagin, Monks, and Bill Sykes. He also got his share of his father's properties and lived with his adopted guardian, and that is Mr. Brownlow. Fagin. He is an ugly old man dressed in flannel. In the novel, he plays cruelly by picking homeless children and turning them into thieves and pickpockets. Monks hires him to turn Oliver into a criminal. The artful dodgers, Charlie Bates, Bill Sykes, and Nancy are part of Fagin's thieves, and he added young Oliver Twist to this gang. At the end of the novel, Fagin is convicted for all his crimes. Nancy. Nancy is part of Fagin's gang and has worked as a child pickpocket since infancy. She is also described as a prostitute and a mistress of Bill Sykes. She shows compassion for Oliver after she sends Oliver back to Fagin when Mr. Brownlow took him in to care for him. Nancy helps Oliver by seeking help from Rose Maylie and Mr. Brownlow, and this eventually led to her being murdered by Bill Sykes. Although Nancy did not have a good beginning, she chose to do the right thing, even if it meant betraying the gang and risking her life. Mr. Brownlow. He is portrayed as a kind-hearted man who is positive. He loves to read books and is robbed by the pickpockets trained by Fagin. He is the first to give Oliver a home. Oliver is taken away to Fagin after he sends him on an errand to the bookshop. Mr. Brownlow remains optimistic and seeks to find him by offering 5 guineas reward to anyone who gives information about a young boy, Oliver Twist. Mr. Bumble gave a bad report about Oliver. Still, Mr. Brownlow had wished for a better report. He later liaises with Rose Maylie and Nancy to get justice for Oliver by catching Monks and prosecuting Fagin and the rest of the gang. It was revealed that he was a good friend of Mr. Leeford, Oliver's father. He also ensured that Oliver got his share of his father's properties and adopted him. Monks. He is known as Edward Leeford, the son of Mr. Leeford and his legal wife. He is Oliver's half-brother. He is described as a young man with purple lips and red sores all over his hands. This was due to his fits or seizures, which he frequently experienced. He tries to destroy Oliver's chance of inheriting their father's properties by hiring Fagin to turn Oliver into a thief and cause him to end up in jail. He lacks family love and a moral upbringing. At the novel's end, he takes a share of his father's wealth, spends it lavishly, and returns to his criminal life, leading to his death in a faraway jail. Bill Sykes. He is a wicked robber and a murderer. His face had beer stains and his clothes were dirty. He had a shaggy white dog. He is an ally of Fagin. Fagin plans the crimes and Bill Sykes carries them out. He is wicked and heartless, and this is because he murdered Nancy in cold blood by striking her with a club till she died. The evil doesn't go unpunished indeed. While he tries to escape after Nancy's murder, he ends up hanging himself mistakenly, which leads to his death. Mr. Bumble. He is described as a very fat, middle-aged, and bad-tempered man. He decided to give Oliver up for apprenticeship because he asked for more food, and this shows he's very inconsiderate and heartless. He also gave a bad report of Oliver to Mr. Brownlow. He married Mrs. Mann and they worked together as parish officials of the workhouse, and that's where they oppressed the orphans. They also willingly helped monks to hide the evidence of Oliver's identity, that is the gold locket and the ring. He lost his position together with Mrs. Mann, now Mrs. Bumble. Agnes Fleming. She is Oliver's mother. She left home with his father and sister Rose in shame after getting pregnant with Mr. Leeford illegally, and Mr. Leeford is a friend of Mr. Brownlow. Agnes died while her illegitimate son was born. Even though she gave her gold locket and ring to the midwife, that is old Sally, the baby did not get any recognition and was put in an orphanage without an identity, and that was Oliver Twist. The Artful Dodger. He is a young boy who acted like a man. He is short, bow-legged, and had ugly eyes. He is a talented pocket trained by Fagin. His real name is Jack Dawkins, and he steals the handkerchief of Mr. Brownlow together with Charlie Bates. Charlie Bates. He belongs to Fagin's gang. He and the Dodger steals the handkerchief of Mr. Brownlow. He is so disgusted by Bill Sykes' evil ways that he gives up crime and becomes a respectable citizen at the end of the story. Mrs. Maylie. She is an old widowed lady. She adopted Rose Fleming and gave her a happy life after her father died and she was homeless. She is very gentle and caring, to the extent that when Rose is sick due to an illness, Mrs. Maylie sends Oliver to call Dr. Osborne and they care for her. When Rose and her son Harry married, she becomes Rose's mother-in-law, Rose Maylie. She is beautiful and is the niece of Mrs. Maylie. She is full with compassion when he learns of Oliver's story after he was injured after the Chelsea robbery. Rose was described as a woman whose name is stained because of her birth, and so wicked people will not let her forget her past. The reason was because she was an orphan that was adopted by Mrs. Maylie. Later, monks confessed that she is a sister of Agnes Fleming, the mother of Oliver Twist. Later, she becomes Mrs. Maylie's daughter-in-law after she and Harry get married at the end of the story, despite her being an orphan. Harry Maylie. She is the son of Mrs. Maylie. She was in love with Rose Maylie, but because of the issues surrounding her past, such as her father changing his name out of shame and also because she is an orphan, made it difficult for them to get engaged and married. However, Harry married Rose by the end of the story when the issues concerning her past and Oliver were uncovered. Noah Claypole, an ugly boy of 19 years old, he was a charity boy and an apprentice of Mrs. Sawberry. Oliver fought him over hateful comments he made about his mother. He is a thief who steals from his masters, that is the Sawberrys, and he runs to London with Charlotte, their servant, after stealing from them. Fagin later employed him to spy on Nancy. At the end of the novel, he was pardoned for his crimes because he assisted the police in catching Fagin. Mr. Grimwick. He is a good friend of Mr. Brownlow. He was a stout gentleman with a grouchy look on his face and a limp in his leg. Mr. Leeford. He is Oliver and Monk's father who dies long before the novel's events. He was an intelligent, high-minded man whose family forced him into an unhappy marriage with a wealthy woman. He eventually separated from his wife and had an illegal love affair with Agnes Fleming. He intended to flee the country with Agnes, but died before he could. He, however, willed part of his properties to the child to be born by Agnes. Dr. Osborne. He is Mrs. Maylie's family physician. Dr. Osborne is fiercely loyal to the Maylies and eventually to Oliver when he is shot during the robbery. He also helps in resolving the identity of Oliver. Old Sally. She is an elderly pauper who serves as the midwife at Oliver's birth. Old Sally steals Agnes' gold locket and ring, the only clue to Oliver's identity. She later hands information about the gold locket and ring, which she sent to a pawn shop, to Mrs. Maylie, the caretaker of the workhouse, before dying. Mrs. Bedwing. She is Mr. Brownlow's kind-hearted housekeeper. Mr. Giles. Mrs. Maylie's loyal servant. Mr. Brittles. He is a worker at the house of the Maylies. Mrs. Mann. She is the caretaker of the workhouse where Oliver is raised. Mrs. Mann physically abuses and half-starves the children in her care. She also handed the gold locket and ring of Agnes to monks who threw them into a river. Mr. Gamfield. He is a brutal chimney sweeper. Oliver almost becomes Mr. Gamfield's apprentice. Charlotte. Charlotte works for the Sawberrys. She is a servant and lives in the same house with them. After Oliver arrives as an apprentice, she misuses Oliver, as do the Sawberrys. Charlotte's love interest is Noah Claypole, an assistant in the shop, and she is willing to do anything for him. She and Noah later steal from the Sawberrys and run away to London. Mr. Sawberry. He is the undertaker to whom Oliver is apprenticed. He is a decent man who is kind to Oliver. Mrs. Sawberry. She is Mr. Sawberry's wife. Mrs. Sawberry is a mean, judgmental woman. She maltreats Oliver when Oliver is taken in as an apprentice, which causes Oliver to run away to London. This brings us to the end of our character analysis of Oliver Twist. Watch out for the literary devices and themes of Oliver Twist on this channel.